Kaiba versus Zigfried. It's the Kaiba Cup finals. Zigfried is personally disqualified by Kaiba for entering under a false name. Zigfried says that this act proves that Kaiba is afraid of him. However, Kaiba reveals that he's only disqualifying him, not kicking him out. And so, Kaiba challenges him to a duel. Spoilers, Kaiba wins after thwarting Zigfried's Valkyrie control style deck. It's kind of cool, but he wins in the end. However, the question for today is, could Zigfried have beaten Kaiba with some slight changes to his plays? Or could Kaiba have won much earlier in the duel had he done some changes as well? And a very weird thing, at the end of the duel, the final shot of Zigfried, he is shown dropping the Golden Castle of Stromberg field spell. This is odd, because this card would have won in the duel, so why didn't he play it? And where did this card come from? Well, we'll find all that out a little bit later. So, for now, let's jump into the duel. Before the duel begins, in a surprise twist for the series, Zigfried tosses a coin to determine who goes first. Zigfried wins and chooses Kaiba to go first. Older day Yu-Gi-Oh! It's typically better to go first because you get an advantage, you draw on your first turn back in those days. However, for Zigfried, since he has OTK potential abilities in his deck, it's in his best interest to go second to attempt to obliterate Kaiba. It's not going to work out that way, but it makes sense why he wants to go second. And so, the duel begins and Kaiba goes first. He draws, and his opening hand consists of X-Head Cannon, Z-Metal Tank, Clone Dragon, Flat Level 4, Magical Trick Mirror, and Negate Attack. Kaiba starts by summoning his X-Head Cannon to the field. He then sets his Negate Attack and Magical Trick Mirror face down, and ends his turn. It's Zigfried's turn, and he draws. His opening hand consists of Valkyrie Erst, Valkyrie Svite, Valkyrie Drite, Mischief of the Time Goddess, Ride of the Valkyries, and Valkyrie's Embrace. I'm going to butcher a lot of Norse mythology names here, so I'm just going to apologize in advance. Zigfried starts by activating Ride of the Valkyries. Thanks to this spell, he's allowed to special summon as many Valkyrie monsters in his hand to the field. The catch is that they must all be put into the deck during this turn's end phase. And so, with 3 Valkyrie monsters in his hand, Zigfried summons Valkyrie Erst, Svite, and Drite to the field. Since Svite was summoned, its effect activates, which destroys 1 monster the opponent controls when it is summoned. With only 1 monster, Kaiba's X-Head Cannon is destroyed. Next, Zigfried activates the effect of Valkyrie Erst, who can banish 1 monster in Kaiba's grave once per turn. After banishing a monster, she replaces her own attack with the banished monster's attack until the end of the turn. Finally, Valkyrie Drit's attack increases, since she gains 100 attack for every banished monster. With no monsters on Kaiba's side of the field, Zigfried attempts to go for game by attacking directly. However, Kaiba activates Negate Attack to negate the attack and bring the battle phase to an immediate end. Despite this, now in the main phase 2, Zigfried activates his Mischief of the Time Goddess spell. Due to this card's effect, it skips 1 whole turn and moves the turn count straight to Zigfried's next battle phase. So Zigfried's end phase, Kaiba's entire turn, Zigfried's next draw phase, standby phase, main phase 1, they're all skipped. So we're back in the battle phase of the next turn. Since draw phases were skipped, neither player got to draw any cards. However, more importantly, since Zigfried's end phase was skipped, the detrimental effect of Ride of the Valkyries did not get a chance to activate. So this means that the 3 Valkyrie monsters on his field don't have to be bounced back into the deck. Just gets to keep them on the field now. Quite clever, really. Now, back in the battle phase, Zigfried attacks again, attempting to go for game. However, Kaiba activates his last face down, Magical Trick Mirror. Due to this card's effect, when he is attacked, he can activate a spell card in the opponent's graveyard as if it was his own. Kaiba chooses to use Mischief of the Time Goddess himself. It activates, and so the turn count is skipped again. The rest of Zigfried's battle phase is just gone, so is his main phase 2, his end phase, Kaiba's draw phase, his main phase 1, and now we're back into the battle phase of Kaiba's next turn. Unfortunately, with no monsters, Kaiba is forced to move from his battle phase into his main phase 2. He summons his Z-Metal Tank to the field into defense. Upon its summon, the effect of Clone Dragon in his hand activates, which summons itself to the field in response to a successful summon. Not only that, but Clone Dragon then takes on all of the stats of the monster that helped it come to the field. Kaiba, with essentially 2 Z metal tanks on the field in defense, ends his turn. It's Zigfried's turn, and he draws Nobleman of Crossout. Zigfried activates his Valkyrie's Embrace. This card lets him change one monster he controls into defense, and then banish one monster the opponent controls. He switches Valkyrie Dreet into defense, and then banishes Z Metal Tank. Zigfried moves into his battle phase and uses Valkyrie Erst to attack and destroy Clone Dragon. He then attacks Kaiba directly using Valkyrie's Vite. Kaiba takes the first damage of the duel. I'm not quite sure why Zigfried didn't swap his Drite back into attack after switching it into defense to banish one of Kaiba's cards. Had he done that, he would have been able to reduce Kaiba's life points so much that later in the duel, when he tries to use Dimension Fusion, he won't have enough life points to do that. And by not activating that card, Kaiba would have lost the duel. The only defense I can give Zigfried is maybe this card has a secret detrimental effect that we don't know about, because if we look at the card, we can't see all of its effects. So maybe it has a hidden cost that you can't change that monster from defense back to attack for the rest of this turn. But the only argument against that is the real world version of this card that got made later on. That doesn't have any detrimental effects either, so I don't know. It's either a huge misplay of Zigfried that would have won in the duel, or perhaps he just wasn't allowed to switch it into attack. I don't know. Misplay Zigfried, I guess? Regardless, Zigfried ends his turn. It's back to Kaiba, and he draws Pitch Dark Dragon. He summons it to the field into defense. He sets his flat level 4 trap face down and ends his turn. It's Zigfried's turn, and he draws Griffin's Feather Duster. Zigfried changes Valkyrie Dreet back into attack. He then enters his battle phase. He attacks with Zvite, destroying Pitch Dark Dragon. Now, since a monster was destroyed, Kaiba activates his flat level 4. This lets both players summon any level 4 or lower monster from their deck straight to the field. Kaiba summons Wide Dragon Head, while Zigfried summons another copy of Valkyrie Drite. Since Wide Dragon Head's defense is too high for Zigfried's monsters to deal with, he is forced to end his battle phase. And with no further moves, Zigfried ends his turn. Now, fun fact, if this was the real world, Zigfried would have won. There's 2 level 4 or lower Valkyrie monsters that exist in the real world that I don't think exist in the anime just yet, but if he would have summoned either one of those 2, he would have won the duel right here and right now. However, since they probably don't exist in his deck, there's no misplay. Just a fun fact for you all. It's Kaiba's turn, and he draws Pot of Greed. He activates it straight away to draw 2 new cards. He gets Dimension Fusion and Soul Absorption. Kaiba pays 2,000 life points to activate his Dimension Fusion. This card forces both players to special summon as many banished monsters that they have to the field. Kaiba summons his X-Head Cannon and Z-Metal Tank. Since Zigfried has no banished monsters, he summons nothing. Kaiba follows this play by activating his Soul Absorption. Now, whenever a card is banished, he will gain 500 life points. A good thing too, as Kaiba banishes his X, Y, and Z to Contact Fusion summon his XYZ Dragon Cannon. With 3 cards banished, Kaiba gains 1500 life points. Kaiba enters his battle phase and attacks and destroys one of the Valkyrie Drits that, keep in mind, was being boosted by 300 since there are 3 banished monsters. With no more plays, Kaiba ends his turn. For clarity as well, if you're wondering why he didn't use XYZ Dragon Cannon's ability to discard a card to destroy a card on the field, he has no hand. All he has is this XYZ Dragon Cannon at the moment, so let's hope it survives. It's back to Zigfried, and he draws Nibelung's Treasure. He activates it immediately. This card lets him equip a Nibelung's Ring equip spell from his deck onto an opposing monster. He equips it onto XYZ Dragon Cannon. Following this, the second effect of Nibelung's Treasure activates. Having successfully equipped the card onto an opponent's monster, Zigfried gets to draw 5 new cards. That's kind of insane, really, isn't it? Just a card that you equip something from your deck to an opponent's monster, draw 5 cards. Moving on. The cards he draws are Fortune Chariot, Mystical Space Typhoon, Goddess Skuld's Oracle, Goddess Verdan's Guidance, and Wotan's Judgment. And to keep track of what else is in his hand, his other 2 cards that he has are Nobleman of Crossout and Griffin's Feather Duster. Now, due to the effect of Nibelung's Ring, XYZ Dragon Cannon cannot attack, be tributed, change its battle position, or activate its effect. Also, during the equipped monster's draw phase, the controller draws 2 cards instead of 1. If they draw a monster card during this, they must discard one of the monsters every time they do. Now, I know I just complimented Nibelung's Treasure with its ability to draw 5 cards. This card, I know XYZ is a huge problem for Zigfried to deal with. He doesn't really have any big monsters to get over this monster, so he needs to shut it down so he can attack directly for his plays. But that ability to draw 2 new cards, I don't think that is worth that risk, really. I know he's got no other options, but if the opponent draws 2 spell cards or a spell on the trap card, they just get a pot of greed every turn. And honestly, the worst case scenario, the opponent draws like 2 monster cards, they can get rid of the worst of the 2 monsters and get the one they want. So, I don't really rate this card. I'm not a huge fan of it. Fun fact. With a revitalized hand, Zigfried tributes Valkyrie Drift to summon Fortune Chariot. He then activates his Chariot's effect to equip it to another monster he controls. He chooses Valkyrie Zvite. By doing this, Zvite can now attack directly. However, its attack points will be cut in half when it does. And so, Valkyrie Zvite attacks Kaiba directly. Since all of Zigfried's other monsters are unable to attack over XYZ Dragon Cannon, he moves into his main phase 2 and activates Mystical Space Typhoon to destroy Kaiba's soul absorption. He sets Wotan's Judgment face down and ends his turn. Now, a small error by Zigfried right here is using MST way too quickly. What he should have done, since that card is not hurting anyone, set Mystical Space Typhoon face down. It's a quick play spell. If Kaiba decides to start banishing cards, he can just chain this card to it, destroy that card, no life points for the opponent. But the better reason to set it face down, if Kaiba decides to, I don't know, set a trap face down to keep himself in the duel, which is what he's been doing this entire duel, maybe destroy that instead. Like, what's going to happen on the next turn? So just keep in mind when Kaiba sets the trap card face down, what if we destroyed that instead? Take a look. It's Kaiba's turn, and he draws 2 cards due to Nibelung's Ring. He draws Monster Reborn and Attack Guidance Armor. Since both cards aren't monsters, he keeps both. Kaiba sets Attack Guidance Armor face down and ends his turn. It's Zigfried's turn, and he draws Pegasus Wing. Zigfried moves straight into his battle phase and uses Valkyrie Zvite to attack directly by halving its attack. However, Kaiba activates Attack Guidance Armor to redirect the attack to Valkyrie Erst instead. Zigfried, in response, activates his Wotan's Judgment, which lets him negate an attack by drawing 1 card and then shuffling a spell card in his hand into his deck. Zigfried draws the top card of his deck, which is Goddess Erd's Verdict. He then shuffles Nobleman of Crossout from his hand into the deck. Now, with all 3 Goddess cards in his hand, he activates all 3 to begin his monster erasing combo. First, he uses the effect of Goddess Skuld's Oracle. Once per turn, Zigfried can use its effect to look at the top 3 cards of Kaiba's deck. He can then rearrange them into whatever order he wishes. He can then use Goddess Verdan's Guidance to guess the type of card on the top of Kaiba's deck. If he guesses it correctly, Kaiba must set it face down on his field. And then finally, with Goddess Erd's Verdict, it lets him, once per turn, select one of Kaiba's set cards and guess what it is. If he guesses it correctly, it is banished. And so, Zigfried activates the effect of Goddess Skuld's Oracle. He looks at the top 3 cards of Kaiba's deck, which are all Blue Eyes White Dragon. Zigfried activates Goddess Verdan's Guidance and guesses that the top card is a monster card. He is correct, so Blue Eyes is set face down on Kaiba's field. Finally, Zigfried activates Goddess Erd's Verdict and declares that the face down card is Blue Eyes White Dragon. He is correct, so Blue Eyes is banished. Zigfried ends his turn. It's Kaiba's turn, and he draws 2 cards thanks to Nibelung's Ring. He draws 2 copies of Blue Eyes White Dragon. Since he drew a monster card, he must discard one of them to the graveyard. Luckily, Kaiba plays Monster Reborn to bring it straight back from the grave to the field. Kaiba enters his battle phase and attacks Valkyrie Zigfried, attempting to destroy it. However, by sending the equipped Fortune Chariot to the grave, Zigfried is able to prevent Zigfried from being destroyed by the battle. With no further plays, Kaiba ends his turn. It's Zigfried's turn, and he draws Valkyrie Brundhild. Zigfried immediately uses his Goddess spell combo. Starting with Goddess Oracle, he looks at the top 3 cards of Kaiba's deck. The cards are revealed to be Shrink, Cave Dragon, and Luster Dragon number 2. Zigfried tells Kaiba to put Luster Dragon number 2 on the top. Zigfried then uses Verdan's Guidance to guess monster on the top of the deck. He's correct, it gets set face down. Finally, Zigfried guesses the face down card with Erd's Verdict. He is correct, so Luster Dragon number 2 is banished. Here, Zigfried realizes with Blue Eyes White Dragon on Kaiba's field and currently no way to overpower it, he needs to replenish his life points just in case. So, he decides to sacrifice all of his goddess cards by activating Griffin's Feather Duster. This destroys all of his own spells and traps in order to gain 500 life points for each one destroyed. The 3 continuous goddess spell cards are destroyed, and Zigfried gains 1500 life points. Following this, Zigfried tributes Valkyrie Zigfried and Valkyrie Erst in order to tribute summon Valkyrie Brundhild. He summons it into defense. Due to the effect of Valkyrie Brundhild, it gains 300 attack for each dragon and warrior type monster on the field. Zigfried ends his turn. It's back to Kaiba, and he draws 2 cards. He gets Cave Dragon and Shrink. Since he drew a monster, Cave Dragon is sent to the graveyard. Kaiba moves into his battle phase and attacks Valkyrie Brundhild with Blue Eyes. Due to Brundhild's second effect, it can prevent itself from being destroyed by reducing its defense by 1000. Kaiba sets his Shrink quick play spell face down and ends his turn. It's Zigfried's turn, and he draws Enchanted Sword Notung. He switches Valkyrie Brundhild into attack. He then activates his Enchanted Sword, equipping it to Brundhild. When equipped to a monster, all face-up dragon-type monsters currently on the field are banished. But not only that, this increases its attack by 400. And to rub salt in the wound, Enchanted Sword also grants the equipped monster the ability that whenever it battles a dragon-type monster, it is destroyed at the start of the damage step. Luckily, since Kaiba still has XYZ Dragon Cannon on the field, Zigfried is unable to attack over it. And so he activates the last card in his hand, Pegasus Wing. This card can only be activated if there is a Fortune Chariot in the graveyard. Now, one face-up Valkyrie monster has its attack halved, but can attack directly this turn. Valkyrie Brundhild attacks directly, attempting to go for game. However, Kaiba uses his Shrink quick play spell to keep himself alive by halving Brundhild's attack. As Zigfried ends his turn, the detrimental effects of Pegasus Wing and Shrink expire. It's Kaiba's turn, and again he draws 2 cards. He gets Graceful Charity and Emergency Provisions. Since he drew no monsters, he doesn't discard a card. Kaiba activates Graceful Charity to draw 3 new cards and then discard 2. He draws Chaos Emperor Dragon, Envoy of the End, Cloning, and a mysterious spell or trap card. That he's going to get rid of a little bit later, so it doesn't really matter what it is, but most likely it wasn't that great or was the weakest card in his hand at this point. I'll let you all be the judge. What was this spell or trap that he had in his hand that he's going to get rid of? That fits in Kaiba's deck, let me know. Anyway, Kaiba discards his Blue Eyes White Dragon and Cloning for the detrimental effect of Graceful Charity. Next, he banishes 1 light and 1 dark monster from his grave in order to summon his Chaos Emperor Dragon, Envoy of the End. He banishes Blue Eyes and Pitch Dark Dragon to summon it. Kaiba sets his Mysterious Spell Trap face down and then activates Emergency Provisions to send it to the graveyard in order to increase his life points by 1000. Now, with enough life points, he is able to activate the devastating effect of Chaos Emperor Dragon. You see, by paying 1000 life points, he can send all cards on the field and all cards in both players' hands to the graveyard. And for every card sent, Zigfried will take 300 damage. The effect is successful. 5 cards are sent to the grave in total. Chaos Emperor Dragon, XYZ Dragon Cannon, Valkyrie Brundhild, Enchanted Sword Notung, and Nibelung's Ring. Kaiba ends his turn with both players having no cards on their field and no cards in their hand. Fingers crossed that Zigfried doesn't draw a monster with over 550 attack points. It's Zigfried's turn, and the penultimate turn of the duel. He draws and gets Pot of Greed. He activates it to draw 2 new cards. He gets Magical Arms and Final Light. No monsters, unlucky Zigfried. Zigfried activates Magical Arms. This card increases Zigfried's life points by 1000 when it's activated. But not only that, now for the rest of the duel, as long as this card remains on the field, during each player's turn, the turn player must predict how many spell cards they will activate that turn. Based on the prediction, both players will then gain 500 life points for how many cards that they predicted. However, should the turn player activate less or more than the predicted cards, they will take 1000 damage for every spell card predicted during the end phase. Meaning, if I have 1000 life points, I predict I'm going to use 5 spell cards, I'll gain 2500 life points, my opponent will as well, and let's just say at the end of the turn I use 4 cards or I use 6 cards, not the amount I specified, I'm going to take double the damage that I gambled basically. So I would take 5000 and I'd lose the duel. And so Zigfried predicts he will activate 1 more spell card this turn. Both players gain 500 life points. Zigfried activates his spell card Final Light by paying 1000 life points. This lets him special summon 1 light monster in his graveyard. However, when he does, Kaiba is also allowed to summon any monster in his grave with 2000 or less attack, but he must summon it in attack position. Zigfried summons Valkyrie Brundhild. Kaiba summons his Cave Dragon into attack. Brundhild gains 300 attack due to Kaiba controlling a Dragon-type monster. Brundhild attacks and destroys Cave Dragon. Brundhild's attack points drop since the dragon is now taken off the field. Zigfried ends his turn. In hindsight, Magical Arms seems like a foolish thing for Zigfried to play because he has enough life points to use his Final Light. I know he'd only have 100 life points left if he did it, but it would deny Kaiba any life points on his turn to replenish himself with, so it seems like it's in Zigfried's best interest not to use this card's effect. So would Kaiba have lost the duel had Zigfried not activated this? No, Zigfried still would have lost. Kaiba's alternative play to win would have been to use Spell Reproduction to get Monster Reborn back, bring back Blue Eyes White Dragon, attack into the monster. GG. This means Zigfried didn't misplay, he's just got no way of winning after this point. It's Kaiba's turn, and the final turn of the duel. He draws and gets Card of the Mise. Despite having only 1 card in his hand, Kaiba predicts he will use 4 spell cards. The amount doesn't really matter too much this turn as long as Kaiba wins this turn. But he can't go too high because remember Zigfried's gaining life points from this as well, so he's got to be clever. And luckily what Kaiba does is perfect. Both himself and Zigfried gain 2000 life points. Kaiba activates Card of the Mise. This lets him draw until he has 5 cards in his hand. Since his hand is empty, he draws 5 new cards. He gets Soul Release, Spell Reproduction, Absorb Spell, Cost Down, and Defusion. Kaiba activates Soul Release first to remove from play up to 5 cards in the graveyards. He removes only 1 card, Chaos Emperor Dragon. He then activates his Spell Reproduction. By discarding 2 spell cards in his hand, he can add 1 spell in his grave back to his hand. He discards Absorb Spell and Cost Down and adds back Dimension Fusion. Kaiba activates Dimension Fusion by paying 2000 life points. Kaiba and Zigfried must now both summon as many monsters as possible that are banished. Kaiba summons 3 Blue Eyes White Dragons, Chaos Emperor Dragon, and Luster Dragon number 2. Siegfried, with no banished monsters, summons nothing. Unfortunately for Kaiba, since 5 dragon monsters are now on the field, Valkyrie Brundhild gains 300 attack points for each, making it stronger than all of Kaiba's monsters. However, Kaiba has a plan. He enters his battle phase and crashes Luster Dragon number 2 into Valkyrie Brundhild. Luster Dragon is destroyed since it's weaker, and Kaiba takes a huge chunk of damage, leaving him with just 50 left. However, with 1 less dragon on the field, Valkyrie Brunhild loses 300 attack. Now, on equal footing, Kaiba uses Chaos Emperor Dragon to attack into Valkyrie Brunhild. Zigfried uses his monster's effect to decrease its defense by 1000 to stop it from being destroyed in battle. Chaos Emperor Dragon is destroyed, however, with one less dragon on the field again, Brunhild's attack decreases. Kaiba attacks again with one of the Blue Eyes White Dragon. Zigfried reduces its defense again to keep it alive. Following this, the second Blue Eyes attacks. With no more defense points to shed, Valkyrie Brunhild is finally destroyed. Lastly, with an open field, the third and final Blue Eyes White Dragon attacks Zigfried directly. With exactly 3000 life points and exactly 3000 attack, Kaiba wins the duel. Zigfried drops to his knees in defeat, and as he does, we see him drop the Golden Castle of Stromberg from his hands. My goodness, if this card was in his hand, that meant if he would have activated it last turn, he would have won. Why didn't he do that? Because he didn't have it in his hand. I know this because Zigfried's hand was empty after his last turn. So, where did this card come from? Well, there's a slim chance that this could have been the next card he would have drawn, and maybe it fell from the top of his deck, or he just drew it at the very last second just to look and see what he got or something. Or maybe it was just in his pocket and he just fell out at the very end, or he looked at it just as he's been defeated. I don't know. The point is, he doesn't have this card in play, so he couldn't win this card. So there's no shenanigans at this ending here. I don't know why it was in his hand. It's probably just foreshadowing this card for the next duel and the fact that he couldn't use it or anything like that. Apart from the moments that I pointed out in this duel where characters could have won during certain plays, both players did do the best they could with the cards that they had throughout the majority of this duel, so there wasn't too much of wiggle room in terms of the outcome of this duel. Now, if you enjoyed this video and you would like to see another Kaiba duel, well, I have one right here. But if you're more of a non-Kaiba duelist, well, we have this one here now. Thank you all for watching. Catch you later.